Hello, everyone. This is Nikisha. Jessica, Petal, and myself would like to welcome you to this week's episode of OLL in the News, Organizational Change and How to Overcome Resistance. What is organizational change and why does it cause so much heartache? Grimsley defines organizational change as the process where an organization changes its structure, strategies, methods, technology, or culture. The change process may be planned and can occur over time or over a distinct period of time. The intent of change is to benefit the organization and/or the individual. Change may be necessary to respond to globalization, technology, social networks, or generational differences. One example of organizational change that many companies have had to undergo is embracing the virtual workplace. In our readings, we've discussed millennials and their preference for flexibility and the ability to work outside the traditional workplace. To attract and retain millennials, companies have adapted and now offer telework and flexible schedules. If organizational change is to benefit the individual and the organization, it begs one to question why it causes so much angst. When leaders mention change, people start running for the hills as if the world is coming to an end. According to the clip by Jason Clark, change causes an emotional reaction. It may not be the change itself causing the response, but the feelings that the change process elicits. Hellriegel and Slocum identified 6 reasons why people resist change. First, people resist change because they have a faulty perception of how the change will affect them. Second, people with certain personality characteristics are naturally predisposed to resist change. According to Hellriegel and Slocum, people with low self-esteem are more likely to see the negative aspects of change, and those with high self-esteem are more likely to work toward change. People also resist change because they may have to learn new behaviors or habits. This brings to mind a group of employees who are accustomed to the management style of a manager who allows them to work a flexible schedule. A new manager comes in and causes a high level of discomfort amongst employees because they have developed a comfortable routine and they question whether this routine will change due to the entrance of the new manager. Resistance to change also occurs when people perceive the change as a threat to their power or ability to influence. Those persons who have some level of power or control over something useful to the organization may question whether they will maintain this level of influence under the new organizational structure. The 5th reason why people resist change is due to fear. Hellriegel and Slocum explain that change causes a sense of uncertainty, and people fear things that they do not know. Going back to the example of the team losing their beloved manager, the team is resistant because they don't know who the new manager will be and how their work or lifestyles will change. Lastly, change causes people to question whether they will suffer a financial loss. People grow accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and concerns regarding how change will impact them financially can cause resistance. Resistance is a natural part of the change process, but it does not have to derail the process. In the article, Ready, Set, No, Taylor identifies things that leaders can do to mitigate the impact of resistance. First, leaders must assess whether the organization is ready for change. In the article, Adam initiated the change process because he saw that employees were unaware of the purpose of their work and work products were having an impact on customers. But he failed to assess how this was impacting the employees themselves. Taylor suggests that in order for change to be successful, there must be some level of discomfort for people to embrace change. The next step is for leaders to develop a plan for change. The plan must consider how all stakeholders, both internal and external, will be impacted by the change. The plan goes beyond the idea of making something better and considers the people involved in the process. Lastly, Taylor suggests that leaders must be committed to the change process. This relates to Cousey's and Posner's leadership competency of Model the Way. If leaders are not willing to stick with it during the challenging times, which are certain to come up during the change process, they cannot expect shareholders to embrace change. Once leaders identify the need for change, develop a plan for change, and their leadership team embraces change, Hellriegel and Slocum identify 3 critical steps that must be taken to ensure that the change initiative is successful. The change process must then consider the employee. Leaders must help employees create a new story of how change will impact them. They must communicate with employees about the change, and they must establish an organizational culture where employees are empowered. Employees need to have a voice in the change process, and leaders can use surveys, site visits, or open discussions to assess employee concerns and identify what they expect to receive as a result of the changes. Once leaders have an idea of what the employees' concerns are, they can identify the benefits they will receive from the change. The changes could lead to a reduced organizational hierarchy, leading to greater employment opportunities or more power in the decision-making process. These benefits can only be identified once leaders know what's important to their employees. Leaders also need to create structures that will empower employees. Employees who have a role in the change process are more likely to get on board with the change, and they can potentially influence others who may be resistant to change. Change can be successful if it is done with openness and transparency. Change is scary and can lead to resistance, but the implications of failing to implement change can be detrimental to an organization. Taylor provides that failure to change can lead to financial loss, unsatisfied customers, reduced employee satisfaction, and it can reduce the credibility of leaders. When customers grow dissatisfied with the organization and take away business, it impacts the organization's bottom line. It can also impact the organization's ability to attract new customers. Further, if organizational factors are having a negative impact on employees and leaders fail to implement initiatives to change the culture, employee dissatisfaction will grow and impact the success of the organization. Finally, internal and external stakeholders lose respect for leaders who are Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of OLL in the News. As we close out this episode, we ask that you think and reflect upon the following questions. 1. You are the Vice President of Human Resources at an organization that is rumored to undergo a merger with another company. The merger may result in job losses and geographic restructuring. As a leader, what are some things that you would do to mitigate resistance? And 2, going back to the article, Ready, Set, No, what guidance would you have given to Adam prior to implementing the organizational change? Again, we thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of OLL in the News, and we look forward to reading your responses to these questions.